Hey lovely women, namaste, Shakti here. How you doing? It's just started to rain outside. Feels quite cozy being inside with the rain. And yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking a little bit today on the power of emotions. And this is in line with my current theme of emotional alchemy, which is, it's my theme at the moment. And I have my retreat coming up on Sunday around this theme. But really, this theme of emotional alchemy arose very organically as I've been writing my book, Rapture, and also just as I've been tuning into what I'm being called to bring forth to serve you. And some things have really crystallized around the power of emotions for me, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, even more so than before. It's been an ongoing journey, and I'm going to speak to that journey a little bit in a minute. But what's really crystallized for me in the last few years, and then even more so as I've been writing Rapture in the last few months, is, so first of all, the key recognition that I had is that everything you've been told is a lie, and that there's this huge, huge, huge web of conditioning and programming that is, in essence, anti-feminine. And so therefore, this programming and conditioning, which is just so entrenched in our society and our culture and our families and our religion and all of the systems that we live within, is that emotions are weak, are wrong, are frightening, should be shut up or pushed away or fixed or hidden. But there really hasn't been a culture of emotional intelligence and a culture of understanding and welcoming emotion as a gift and as a very powerful energy of the divine feminine that has the capacity for profound healing, for profound awakening, for pleasure, for a direct God connection, and for healing the sense of separation that so many of us have. And this isn't what we've been taught, which is why I will constantly refer back to one of my strap lines, which is everything you've been taught is a lie. And for women, this particularly applies to our bodies, our sexuality, and our emotions, which you could say are like the 3 key pillars of the feminine. And I'm just going to talk a little bit then about my own journey with this to illustrate how I came to this recognition of the power of emotion. So not weakness, but power. And really, really going to go into a few examples as well of my own experience and clients that I've worked with using the tools for emotional alchemy and supporting, I guess, wanting to just share with you this reframe, because I believe that so many women are still living with the misconception that there's something wrong with their emotions. And what I really want to impart is there is nothing wrong with you for feeling emotion. There is nothing wrong with any emotion. And all emotions, all of them are beautiful, all of them are divine, all of them are perfect, and all of them, wherever they are on the range of the spectrum of, what you would label positive and negative, which in Tantra we don't label anything as positive, negative, everything just is. Wherever they are on that spectrum for you, they have a purpose, they have a gift, and they are powerful. So let me just let me just talk you through my own journey around this a little bit. So I think I've shared before in a previous video, so I won't go into this part of it in depth. Growing up in a household where dad was the archetypal patriarch, distant, controlling, removed, cold, clinical, unemotional, logical, and mum was the archetypal shadow feminine, victim, martyr, hyper emotional, right? So she may have been expressing a lot of emotion, but it wasn't in any kind of conscious, in touch with herself way. So she was just as in the shadows as my dad around this. So that was my conditioning on top of the patriarchal conditioning. So for me, then I became, I guess, the emotional laborer, the emotional processor for the family and for my parents. But that meant that I also had to repress, or I learned to repress my own emotions and my own emotional needs. And there was no safe container for me to learn how to safely process, which I would say is the case for the most people. We are not taught as young people, and particularly, the conditioning is strong, of course, when you're an infant and a young person, but also teenagers when so much is coming online. There isn't the teaching of how to welcome in your emotions, how to navigate your emotions, how to flow with them, how to use them. Nobody teaches us this. So I went through my 20s and 30s, of course, having emotions and being a very feeling person, but in a way still disconnected from the core of my being, still disconnected from my essence, and probably much more in the way of blaming others if I was feeling something uncomfortable, which is kind of the norm in society, and feeling ashamed for any dark emotion or feeling, and judging myself for that, and therefore keeping it secret even from myself, and certainly not feeling comfortable to share vulnerable feelings with others. And during my 20s and 30s, I was a successful business person. I worked for a top 5 management consultancy. I then had my own marketing research company, international marketing research company. So I was successful. I had a happy marriage. I owned a big house and a car and all that stuff. But actually, I was underneath it all fundamentally unhappy. And I would go into little bouts of not quite depression, but discontent, lack of fulfillment, right? But I wasn't able to look at that within myself at the time, and I didn't feel or know where to go with those feelings, so I suppressed them. Then my awakening began as I began to learn the Nia technique, a conscious dance practice. That's basically where my awakening began in 2001. So that's 20 years ago. And this dance practice, that was the first thing I trained in, revolutionized my whole life. It catalyzed my awakening, and it was centered around the number one principle for the Nia technique was the joy of movement. So it's a movement practice, and it's a conscious movement practice. And so the learning was to be moving in constant awareness of every sensation in the body, of where energy was, hello and welcome, where energy was at any one moment in the body, and of the connection to the space, and of the connection to the music, and of the connection to the people, and actually to the connection with the divine. So this was the practice that I trained in. And as part of this training of somatic awareness in movement and through movement, one of the tools that we learned that was completely new to me was, I can't think of the name of the practice now, but emotional range and emotional expression. So I'll just tell you this because it's a great practice. You put on a piece of music and you would go through a series of emotions picked at random. So they can either be picked at random from a long list of emotions, or You can choose music to support the emotion, which can also be another way to do the practice. But then you dance and embody that emotion, whatever it is. And then the teacher would say change, and you would change and change and change and change and change and change. So we would be embodying the expression of different energies. And so this was my first introduction to experiencing emotion as an energy in the body, and also to begin to cultivate greater flexibility in the capacity to shift emotional states like that. So I could be dancing sadness, and then the next moment I could be dancing joy. I could be dancing surprise, and the next minute I could be dancing fear. So it was cultivating the range of emotionality, because again, for most people, there is the conditioned repression of energy, there is the conditioned repression of emotion, good or bad, which is in inverted commas. So a lot of us have learned to suppress our affect, and our energy is our vital life energy. So with that being repressed, we have less vital life energy, and this is one way in which your sexuality and your emotions are directly connected. Because if you're suppressing, or you've learned to suppress, which all of you have, and you might not even be aware of it, you are in essence clamping down your life force and your sexual energy with that, right? So this is why emotional healing and learning to feel more, to express more, to embody more will open your capacity for sensation, for pleasure, for connection, and for intimacy. So they're absolutely connected. So through this practice of the Nia technique, I learned this, and things began to change. And so I began to connect with my truth through the body more and more. But still, at that point in my life, 20 years ago, if a bad feeling, in inverted commas, came up, which of course it did, I would tend to blame somebody else, my partner at the time, probably most, for my bad feeling. I would feel judgment of myself. I might try to avoid that feeling by thinking about it, analyzing instead of feeling. So analyzing in the head is a great way to avoid feeling. I'm so good at analyzing. I'm brilliant at it, but it avoids feeling. And feeling shame. Still feeling shame for feeling, particularly, of course, those emotions that are labeled as bad, negative. You know, the happy feelings, they are culturally, socially more welcome. The dark feelings are socially less welcome. So I picked up this avoidance and judgment of those darker feelings. But then guess what? The unhappiness grows, and the sense of depression grows, you know, if we don't allow ourselves to feel. As I went through then over the last 20 years, my pathway of awakening, which moved me fully into everything to do with the body, more conscious dance, body work, energy healing, tantra, and all of these practices are about embodied awareness. They're about sensing everything in the body, connecting with energy, and blending this with a deeper sense of conscious awareness simultaneously in the now moment. That's what all of those practices are about. And so as I walked this path, I had some really deep, dark nights of the soul, some very, very painful moments, which for me were always, pretty much always, catalyzed in relationship. And so there I would be, usually after relationship had ended, feeling agonizing heartbreak, feeling despair, hopelessness, the sake of the forsakenness, the feeling of being forsaken, a loneliness. And it's a very somatic feeling for me. So emotions and the body also totally connected. You cannot have an emotion without feeling it as a sensation in the body. And still then, actually, through the awakening, those emotions would overwhelm me totally. I would utterly be unable to cope with life. totally overwhelmed. It was just so intense. I could barely function. I had to function because I had 2 young kids to look after, but I could barely function. So then it was like this huge floodgate had opened, and there was this influx of a massive feeling. And for me, I didn't have the capacity to hold it or to process it or to navigate it with any awareness initially, right? So from one extreme to the other. And that I felt so ashamed of, so ashamed that I was in the state of being overwhelmed by my emotions. And as I look back to myself now, I just feel so much compassion. I'm just going to read, there's a comment there. I'm going to have to put my glasses on to read it. Positive, I have lots of positive avoidance strategies. They look great to everyone else who thinks you're doing so well. Masks for deeper connection. Yep. The thing is, the shame, oh, bless you. Yeah, I'm feeling total overwhelm at the moment. And yes, the shame is hitting me. Do you know, this is the one thing I really, really feel, again, is so important for us to recognize. The shame is such a barrier for all of us. I so know it. Well, it's a barrier to so many things. And it is a conditioned response that is standing in the way of our allowing ourselves to fully feel this emotion, which is a gift, which is a blessing, which is divine, and are allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, and are allowing ourselves to be held or supported by others, and are allowing ourselves to be seen in what we judge, because we've been conditioned to think this, our ugliness. I know this conditioning is really strong, and the shame is really strong to be seen in this, because I've been there multiple times, and now I hold space, and I have been holding space for women for a long time, where it's okay to go there, where it's okay to be seen exactly as you are, without any shame and without any judgment. And that in itself is profoundly healing, because it's not the norm. Just going to read your comments. So this is what I did. I would go into emotional overwhelm. Excuse me a sec. And feel deeply, deeply ashamed. And that shame would deepen the overwhelm and deepen the feeling of disconnection from source, and deepen the feeling of I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, I couldn't possibly reveal this darkness is within myself to somebody else. And it wasn't like I was consciously having those thoughts, but that is basically the process that was going on, right? So ashamed, particularly because I was supposedly, so many years already into this conscious path, and had done so much inner work, which I had, and so much spiritual practice, which I had, so then it was like, how can I possibly admit this to my peer group, who all seem to have it together and never seem to get overwhelmed and don't really seem to have all these dark emotions that I do. There must be something really wrong with me, really, I'm obviously not as spiritually advanced as everybody else. This is the bullshit that I want to just stop. Because it's so damaging. It's so damaging, and it blocks our healing. It blocks our awakening. It blocks our heart opening. It blocks our connection with ourselves and others. It blocks our feeling of wholeness. These feelings are what separate us from ourselves and God. So everything about this is a lie. It's a distraction. But I'm just wanting to own this, to share with you, because I still see this now when I'm running my groups, that there's a lot of shame that women feel, even in speaking up, even in saying, if I'm, for example, offering a teaching and suggesting that something is highly pleasurable to experience, and they're not experiencing that, they feel there's something wrong with them, and they're too ashamed to say, I'm not feeling pleasure. Do you see how shame gets in the way? Like, that self-judgment, that inner critic is such a barrier. So avoidance through analysis, shame, fear, overwhelm, blame, lack of full awareness, and the law of attraction. That was the other thing I wanted to mention, because there is this new age thinking, right? Like that we can misconstrue, that you can't have a bad thought, you can't go into your darkness, because if you do, you're going to attract more of that. And again, this is such a damaging belief. Because guess what? If you are not willing to feel it and go into it, it's not going to go away. You may gloss over it with some positive affirmations. You may gloss over it for a minute with a little bit of distractive, high energy activity, but it's not going to go away. It's going to come back. It's going to come back until you felt it. It's there because it wants to be felt, and it is just energy. So this fear, this law of attraction thing, it's a reversal of what I now believe to be so. And again, this is just my belief and my experience. You know, tell me if yours is different. What I understand is that every feeling has value. Every feeling is gold. Every emotion is there as pure energy to be felt, to be expressed, not repressed. And actually, there is a wealth in each emotion, especially the ones that you judge, actually, especially the ones that you're afraid of, that will lead you to your power, your deeper pleasure, your wholeness, your healing, and your sense of living in alignment with divine. So feelings and emotions are holy. Welcome them. And as you integrate, as you feel and integrate each emotional state as it comes, so then you're in a more aligned, truly authentically aligned place to, work with the law of attraction for sure. But it's then authentic, and it's then rooted, and it's then grounded. But, you know, we are cyclical beings. We are emotional, energetic beings. This is our design. And so part of the awakening process is recognizing this and honoring this, bowing to this, and discovering the wisdom, the power, and the pleasure in this, which is an undoing of thousands of years of patriarchal conditioning. So let me then speak a little bit to, I've got a couple of examples, a couple of kind of case studies I wanted to mention, so you get to see how it works. There's one other thing I wanted to mention before that, which is that as I went through my own path, as I went through my own healing, right, one of the final big kickers for me in recent years is 5 years ago now. Oh, I'm so happy to say that. I entered into an abusive relationship with a narcissist. 7 or 8 months we were together, which ended up ending in a really deep, dark night for me. That's the deepest, darkest night of the soul I've ever experienced. And even though up to this point I had been recognizing more and more, to take that finger back, that it was never about blaming anyone else for how I was feeling, that it was only ever about, this feeling is mine, they haven't caused it, this is something for me to feel and explore, nobody else is ever responsible. So that was my growing awareness, because I'd been studying conscious relationships, I've been studying conscious relationships, authentic relationships, tantra, you know, every possible bloody thing I could to deepen my embodiment of inner union and authentic relating in life. And so seeing more and more and more, okay, it's not about them, this is mine. It's not about them, this is mine. So the blame was going, the overwhelm was still there, the shame and the fear was still there. And then this relationship with this narcissist was kind of like a final kicker, which pushed me right up against the wire to self-love. Because there was nowhere else to go after that. It was like, well, there's nowhere else you can go now but inside. You have to go inside. There's nowhere else to run to. You can't escape yourself any longer. So, again, even though I'd been doing tons and tons and tons of meditation, spiritual work for 20 years, still there. And as part of my healing, I connected with a couple of spiritual teachers, I guess I would say, or meditation guides, both women, and began to attend satsangs with them and have sessions with them. And of course, my own ongoing inner practice, profound. And as part of that next level of healing and unraveling, I finally was in spaces where every emotion was welcome and it was safe. It was safe to feel everything and anything. And I was learning deeper meditation techniques for meeting whatever arose within me fully. So I'd been doing this as a practice for quite some time. My own Tantra teacher, Shakti was the one who first taught me the practice of somatic presencing, so tracking emotion, a sensation and energy in the body. So I'd been doing that since 2012. But with these new guides, that could go a whole level deeper. And personally, I believe we do need someone to support us in this. I certainly did. I probably needed someone to guide me in that process for almost 10 years before I could really do it well enough myself. And in that deeper level of meeting, every energy, every emotion, the deeper level of healing came for me. The deeper level of integration, the deeper level of God-source connection, the deeper level of empowerment, the deeper capacity to then facilitate this for others. And recognizing that actually at source, a lot of this is rooted in trauma. So the surface emotions are there and the trigger responses are there, but when you begin to track them, it's really a process of unraveling trauma in the body, really, you know. The strong emotional responses, the strong emotional reactions that we have to people and to things are always rooted in trauma. And so this has been my practice, and this has been infusing my work more and more. And as I was in these satsangs and in these groups, what I would see again and again and again was people who were sitting there, people who've been on the spiritual path for a long time, for the most part, you know, very deeply committed to their practices, and still things are coming up, right? We're human, things are coming up. But what I saw in every single interaction with the teacher, the guide, or through the practice was that for each person, really, what it always came down to was an unfelt emotion. I witnessed this over and over and over again. There would be something presenting on the surface, and as they were guided to become more present and to notice what was happening in the physical body in that moment and go into the sensation in the body or the current emotional state, what it always boiled down to was feeling an unfelt emotion. And in the allowing of that, there would always be a shift. There would often be tears, heart opening, release, relief, recognition, eyes lighting up in the seeing of truth and in the return to a sense of knowing of who I am, as in I am that I am, as I'm as in I am God, Goddess, I am the divine is me. It was through that. So seeing that for everybody on this path, that had been the missing piece. And also hearing more and more and seeing more and more the prevalence of abuse in tantric and yogic circles from predominantly male teachers who had not been holding space for this aspect of our awakening, and had not obviously done this inner work around their emotional shadows and healing for themselves. So they were acting from a dysfunctional, unconscious, shadowy place. However high up there they were considered to be, you know, they all came tumbling down. So the feminine and female teachers that I've been with have been holding space and creating space for all of this to come through, for men and women. And the awakening process that then I see and I recognize in myself and others, it's not about thought. It's not about being clever. It's not about how much you know. It's about simply being here right now and feeling whatever is there and accepting whatever you're feeling. And that in itself can, in a moment, drop you into pure being. And this is the thing, there's so much fear of feelings that we think are going to be painful, are going to be dark. The thing is, the fear is bigger than the reality, because when we drop into it, things can shift really quickly. So I'm going to give you some examples. One client that I have been working with one-to-one for a while, it's brilliant, I love her, I love this client, I love all my clients actually. Yeah, I love all of my clients. And so as we've been working, various emotional states have been rising. It's a healing of trauma, and it's an opening of her sexual body and her pleasure body. It's beautiful to witness. So she was in a state of anger in one session, feeling anger that had been triggered, but also anger that was just rising, because this is the other thing I want to make clear, is that as you awaken, you feel more. And as you awaken, your traumas, your wounds will come to the surface. So you could suddenly start having an emotion, having a feeling, and not even knowing what it's to do with, right? You might just wake up one day and feel a great sadness around your heart. Or you might see an image or hear a voice or have an encounter that triggers a memory, and then later on you're suddenly feeling anger or whatever it is. This is part of the process. It's not a sign that something's gone wrong. It's a sign that the process is alive and happening. Again, misconceptions that there's something wrong. And so she was feeling anger. And so I sat with her, and our sessions, they're just an hour, you know, so it's not a long time. And when we actually went into the emotional alchemy piece of that session, she flipped from, that sounds wrong, doesn't it? She shifted her state of being from anger and a lot of contraction in the body to ecstatic, blissful, like oneness within 15 to 20 minutes. Because emotion is energy, and if you trace it to its root, it's pure Shakti, and Shakti is bliss. It takes a level of readiness to do that, for that to work that quickly. So if you've got a lot of barriers and armoring in the way, it might not be that quick. So don't judge yourself or compare yourself, please. That's another big thing that seems to happen a lot. And I'm just saying that is what can happen. So the transmutation of anger into bliss and ecstasy, for example. Another client has had issues with overeating and binging and dieting and yo-yoing weight her whole adult life. So at least 20 years or more. Don't know how old she is, but I'm going to say at least 20, 25 years. And we went into an emotional alchemy process, and she was able to access some very deep-seated emotions that were very deeply buried in the body. She hadn't even known were there. I could see they were there, but she hadn't even known. She was unaware that they were there. And there was a big emotional release, and that emotional release continued for several days. And then she messaged me to say, something amazing has happened. I'm no longer turning to food to comfort eat. So you see, those emotions that had been unfelt for so long, all it took was to finally feel them. And I say all it took, which can make light of it, and I do understand you need to be ready and you need to feel completely safe, and it can take time. So don't want to diminish the courage and the trust and the vulnerability it takes to go into those emotional states. And then I just want to speak to one of my own experiences. Like, I could give you a zillion, but here's a fairly recent one. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was, I had a couple of days of being really in a funk, like really in a funk. You know, and these days I just allow my emotions to come. I welcome them. They're with me. And I'm a projector in human design, so people do know, people around me do know what I'm feeling. It's not like I'm blaming anyone. I never blame anyone for my emotions. That's gone. But I don't hide them. So I was in a funk, and one of my feelings, and it has been a repetitive theme, was this longing for the masculine, this longing for a man, this longing for companionship, and then alongside that, like the feeling of loneliness, and just like, oh, I really want a man in my life. I so want a man. Where are the men? You know, that old chestnut that comes back every now and again. And I allowed myself to have that, you know. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to push it away. I'm not going to numb it out. I'm not going to pretend I'm not feeling it when I talk to my friends. I will be selective who I speak to, because not everybody will get it, and I don't want to speak. When I'm in that state, I certainly don't want to speak to someone who's going to try and fix me, because that pisses me right off. You know, feelings are not to be fixed. They are to be felt. And not everyone gets that, however well-meaning they are. And I did my emotional alchemy process for myself, and met that feeling in my body deeply. And it was a beautiful meditation and a beautiful practice. And then guess what? The next day, one man wrote to me on Facebook, another man messaged me and asked me to meet for a walk, and another man messaged me and asked me to meet for a walk. So basically, the very next day, or even that day, 3 men came into my field. So the minute that I had allowed myself to feel fully and process what was arising, and in so doing, shifting the energy, my reality changed. That's how it works. Direct correlation between inside and outside. And so if we keep on avoiding, then we're not going to make the shifts. It's as simple as that. So it's always a choice. It's always a choice. Yeah. What I now see and what I now believe and know is that the emotional realm is one of the most undervalued and underexplored areas of our awakening for men and women. You know, I focus on sacred sexuality. That is my path. I'm a priestess of love and sacred sexuality. But love and sexuality are utterly entwined with our emotions. And as far as I'm concerned, we cannot ascend, we cannot evolve, we cannot awaken until and unless we are fully embodied and have healed the wounds around our hearts, our sexuality, and our emotions. And so learning these tools and these practices and welcoming our emotions back from the wasteland, in my view, is fundamental. Fundamental. You know, because there's a lot of shadow, there's a lot of dysfunction, there's a lot of shame, fear, guilt, blame, and this isn't helping us or anybody. It's cutting us off from ourselves. It's cutting us off from God. It's cutting us off from our relationships, you know, and there's just so much wisdom, healing, power, energy, pleasure in our emotions. Yeah, so that's about it for today. That's all I wanted to say. Just completely spontaneously sharing with you. I hope you have found this useful. If you have questions, post them below. If you've got anything you want to share, post it below. I love to read your comments. I love to answer your questions. I love to interact. And my Emotional Alchemy Day Retreat is coming up Sunday, this coming Sunday, which is August the 1st. Oh my God. It's a whole day online for women, 10 o'clock till 5:30 p.m. That's UK London time. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do this beautiful emotional alchemy process, and I'm gonna share with you loads of tools, loads of practices, and invite you into some deeper self-exploration, because this is where, you know, this is kind of the next level for all of us, for our fuller, deeper empowerment, healing, joy, pleasure. Like, come on, ladies, this is kind of like the next level piece as far as I'm concerned. If you've got any questions about it, just reach out. It's an event that's posted into the group, the Awakening Shakti group. But yeah, just message me and I can send you all the info. That's it for now. So go well, loads of love and blessings. And however you're doing, whatever you're feeling, please, please, please know that it's so welcome. All is well. Just welcome your emotions into your body and love them. Love them in awareness. They are your gifts. Lots of love. Bye for now.